Welcome to another moment in the Word. Can you imagine what it would have been like if you were at the cross? If you were with Jesus at the time into which he was crucified from 9 o'clock in the morning till 3 in the afternoon, that you had witnessed and heard his 7 words from the cross, beginning with, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," hearing that over and over again, to his final word, Meshalim, "Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit." And then he dies. During that last 3 hours, you would have witnessed the darkness over the entire earth. A darkness that was quite strange. It wasn't just simply an eclipse. And also, right after he dies, right after he gives up his spirit, then we witness the earthquake. And we also see the veil in the temple being torn, a veil that's 60 feet high, 6 stories high, 30 feet wide, being torn in half. And then all of the things that go along with that, what would have your reaction be? Well, we're going to have some eyewitnesses, and they give testimony. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all record the Roman soldiers and their reaction. It's actually in Matthew's gospel, we have the centurion mentioned and those who are with him. Here's what it says. We're in Matthew chapter 27 and reading in verse 54. "Now when the centurion and they that were with him watching Jesus saw the earthquake and those things that were done, they feared greatly, saying, 'Truly, this is the Son of God.'" The very first thing that we see, and in the Greek it is really interesting, Kai is the conjunction that's often used and translated "and." And we saw that in verse 51, 52, 53. They're simply links. Kai, Kai, Kai. All of these events, which were natural events, which occurred as a result of Jesus shouting, giving up his spirit, "Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit." But now, at this point, it's not Kai. It's not another link. It's Hodei. And that means there's a shift. A shift from the physical events, earthly events, to what's going on in the hearts of those that are watching Jesus. And we find there's a centurion. Now, what is a centurion? The word in Greek is actually the word 100, and then arche, which means someone who is over 100. That's what the word century means, 100. And centurion is one who is over 100 men. He is actually not a very high-ranking, what we would call field grade officer. He is much like the captain in many armies around the world. He is still of the lower ranks, but he is of the lowest rank of the equestrians, which are the cavalry, and that was an elite force. That was to be honored and respected. This man has 100 people with him, and there were 6 of these centurions that Pilate would have had under his authority. And now we ask, well, then just how many were at the cross? Well, we know that there are the 4. They were the ones that were gambling for the clothing. And remember, there are 5 various pieces of clothing, articles of clothing. And the 4 they distributed, but that 5th one, the robe. And so now we find there are the 4. But don't think that that's all. Remember that there is a large crowd of people. More than 2.5 million Jewish people have come to Jerusalem for Pascha, for Passover, and they have come to celebrate. They're mandated to be there. And this event now is something that has drawn great attention right outside the city gates. And there has been now 6 different trials, and the one who is has been tried is Jesus of Nazareth, and he has been charged with being the king of the Jews. There are many Jews that are coming by. They see him. And we have also those who are followers of Jesus. At first, the women are right at the foot of the cross, but eventually they'll move, and we'll look at them tomorrow. But we have these Romans, and it's not just 4. They're having crowd control, taking responsibility to make sure that nobody takes Jesus down from the cross and tries to save Jesus. And so consequently, you can imagine, there's everywhere you look, Roman soldiers that are making sure things stay in order. This centurion is over these other 80 to 100 soldiers. And they that were with him, they were watching. They were watching, but that's not the only thing they had been doing. Remember in the very beginning, these are the ones in verse 31 of this same chapter, chapter 27, who mocked Jesus. These were the ones who had put a reed in his hand like it was a scepter. These are the ones that had taken off his clothes and stripped him, and then put a scarlet robe on him and mocked him as if he was a king. And then they plaited a thorn bush and made it into a crown and pressed it into his head and mocked him as if that was his crown. And then we find that as they are marching him out of the city, they are the ones that found Simon of Cyrene in verse 32. And then in verse 34, these are the same soldiers that had given Jesus vinegar, sour wine, and myrrh to drink to numb and dull the senses, and Jesus rejected it. These are the same ones who had gambled for his clothing in verse 35. These are the ones that watched him in verse 36. And these are the ones that also put the inscription over his head. So those that are with the centurion are a group of men that have been very busy and very intimately involved in the crucifixion. And they're watching him. It's a participle. It has been very active that they have engaged. They've been attentive to Jesus. And then this word saw. They saw the earthquake. Now this is interesting because there is a typical word for seeing, blepo, which means you see with your eyes and you just simply observe. But this isn't the word that's used. It's adon. It is the same word that Matthew had used in verse 51. And behold the veil. Now he is saying they saw. In other words, they not just saw with their eyes, they understood. They intellectually connected the dots. And they're putting it together. And what did they see? They saw the earthquake. Now, how do you see an earthquake? Well, you feel an earthquake, don't you? But it was more than that. They saw the effects. They saw the effects and realized something else is going on. And it's that word realize that we would probably associate with Adon. They understood this is an unusual execution. It is one they have never experienced before. They have perhaps been an execution squad and have seen many crucifixions, but Jesus is an exception. They had never heard a man like Jesus saying from the cross, "Father, forgive them." And neither did they ever hear somebody at the end of his 6 hours on the cross actually shout. And he's shouting several times, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. And then he's shouting again. And we have this meshalim that's translated to telestai, or it is finished. He's shouting. Nobody at the end of their life has so much strength and power as Jesus. That's what they're witnessing. They're seeing all of these events. But they also see, and it says, and they saw those things that were done. Now, what is done? I'm suggesting there's a possibility, because of the size of the veil being 6 stories high, 30 feet wide, that they, if they were on the Mount of Olives, if that is the place where Golgotha was, that they could actually have seen that? I don't know for sure. What I do know is this. They saw enough that it caused them to, and the word is feared in the English. It's phobia or phobia. It means to have a visceral response, a unreasoned response to a perceived threat. It's not rational. It's not where you prepare for this. Fear is something that is paralyzing. Fear is something that is going to affect you. But the word phobos or phobia, this word is now with another word, which is an adverb, greatly. And the word that is used there is more than just mega. It is more than just a large fear. The word that is used here means that which is to the extreme. There is nothing beyond the measure of this fear. It is to the absolute maximum, their fear. Have you ever had that kind of fear? The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. And that you and I are to work out our salvation with fear and with trembling. And it's the same word, phobos. And that if we see a brother that's overtaken in a fault, that we're to restore them with meekness. That means a willingness to be taught. I may be wrong in my perception of my dear brother that has sinned. But even in my addressing him, I need to be with meekness and with fear. Fear because I'm no different than them. Is fear a part of your life when you approach a holy God? Now, I'm not saying you live in constant fear of God. No, what I'm saying is that when you approach God, that there is more than reverence, that there is an awareness that God is God. He is holy, and his holiness requires a change in me. These are pagan Roman soldiers. They don't have any Jewish theology. They, I'm sure, have not read the scroll of Isaiah. But what they have seen is they have witnessed Jesus. If you and I have been meditating on the crucifixion, something changes, hasn't there? There's something in you that's not quite the same. You sense that here is someone that is unusual. And what did they say? Now, it's really interesting. They say truly. Well, that's really interesting. The word is aletheia in the Greek, and aletheia is the word for truth. And it is the same word Pilate, the Roman governor, said to Jesus, "What is truth?" Well, the fact is, his soldiers knew what truth was because they saw Jesus, the one who is the way, the truth, and the life. And when we reject God, we reject the truth, we reject that Jesus has come in the flesh as God, then we don't understand truth. And that's why we live in a world today of relativism, when we are confused and don't know what is true and what is not. God is true. Now we find they're saying, aletheia, truth, truly, this one, this man was. The word was is a me in the Greek. It's an imperfect tense. It means that he is having been, and he still is. And then Son of God. There is no definite article. But if it's a name, you don't need a definite article. That he's the Son of God. And Son of God means he's come out of God. That he is God, but he is now manifested before us. My dear one, as you have observed the cross, the crucifixion of Jesus, have you merely seen his suffering? Or have you seen this is God's gift to you in himself, dying on the cross for your salvation? Can you confess, as these Roman soldiers, truly, Jesus is the Son of God? Father, thank you and praise you that this has been the whole theme of Matthew, that he has been one from the very beginning all the way through, indicating to us that Jesus is Messiah. He is the Mashiach, but he is also the Son of God, that he is God. Oh, help us, Father. Help us that we would worship you in spirit and in truth, through and in the person of Jesus Christ, in whose precious name we pray. Amen.